Welcome back to the Donor Centric Approach. This podcast is brought to you by MRP Donor Development, where we keep our donors at the center of everything we do, and by our friends and sponsors at Stellar Web Systems, the nonprofit tech solution. As always, I am your host, Orlando Barros, and today I am thrilled to welcome a guest with deep expertise and knowledge in high-level donor development, strategy, and relationship building. My guest today is Doug Stamps. Doug, welcome to our show.
So thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. Doug has worked in senior development roles for national organizations, has a passion for growing donor bases and significant public visibility for the organizations that he's helped. He spent his career navigating the balance between mission integrity and major gift fundraising. All while keeping this conversation, I promise you, this is a guy who's been in the room where it happens. Doug, without saying too much and saying many names, can you give us a sense of the kind of work that you've done and sort of the landscape that you operate in, just to help our listeners understand the perspective that you're bringing to our show today?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Orlando. And let me say this first of all. I want to know you a little bit. I don't know your audience, certainly by name, but I think there are a couple of things I know about your audience already. One, they've discovered as I discovered you, and they have good instinct. As soon as I heard the way you think and talk about development, it was a breath of fresh air, truly. I wouldn't say I'd given up hope. People out there but I was sure pleased to come across you. And so I know that's true about your listeners as well, is that they have good instincts because the way you think and talk about development and the donor centric approach, I think people who want to treat people the way they only care about people as donors as people first, right? And so I admire that a lot. And so it's a pleasure to be with you and with everyone listening. By way of background, probably like everyone on the Zoom, everyone here, we got involved in something because we're passionate about a mission, passionate about a cause. And whether that is, starting a church, starting a ministry, a business, something political. And I've been involved in all of those. It's what drives us. It's what we get involved in. None of us set out to say, hey, I want to be a fundraiser when I grow up. But it's, 5 minutes in, we realized, well, we got to raise money for this, right? And so my background going back, 25 years was more on the political side, but my heart was always the ministry side. So when my wife and I, we had, hardly any money to give away. It wasn't going to politics. It was going to ministry, evangelistic causes that were near and dear to our heart. And so over the years, I'd have friends in ministry say, hey, we're struggling. We need help. We need to figure out how to do this. And I'm thinking, gosh, I know what I'm doing vocationally, professionally. I think it could apply to ministries as well. And honestly, Orlando, I didn't even know what that meant at the time. And so here's what I did. And this is the honest truth. Maybe once every 6 months, I would pray a prayer. God, is there some way I can use this experience, the skills, the knowledge I've learned from people that are all smarter than me for your kingdom and your purposes? I didn't have a burning desire to do anything in particular. I didn't know what that would be anyways. I can't even say I was faithful in praying that, but I think once or twice a year. One day I was praying at the bar in my kitchen counter. Within 24 hours, 3 organizations reached out and said, hey, your name came across our radar. Someone said we should call you, and these are groups I'd never heard of. And since then, I've just been so passionate about helping ministries professionalize their operations and really demystifying the whole idea of development in a way that I think is very much in line with the way you tend to think about these things.
You just mentioned so many great things in that little bit. One, yes. I don't think that none of us were in kindergarten when they asked you when you grew up and you're like, I want to help people raise money, right? Oh, I want to raise money myself. That's not but it is, I think, this is to your point, a culmination of the gifts that the Lord has entrusted us with.
Yep.
Right? And who are we, in a sense, to stand in the way of what the Lord wants to do in us and through us, right? So I think as we continue to, at least for me and for the ministries and the nonprofits that we work with, I always go, who are we to sort of tame down what the Lord is trying to do in our organizations, right? And most importantly, who are we to stop people from fulfilling their call to be disciples within the kingdom by supporting your mission philanthropically. So when you move around that lens, and we talked about this in the pre-recording, it's just this free sense of like, oh my gosh, I think I can do this finally,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
And when you get, I think you probably have a similar experience. When you get a leader or a founder or executive director to make that switch in their head, for people like us, it's life-giving. You just go,
Yeah.
thank you, Lord. I'm in the right field. And I think you even allowing them to build that trust within themselves, that trust then transfers into their everyday work. Because I think that whether or not you are a huge national organization or a one-person nonprofit, the biggest thing that you want to develop is trust. People, I've heard this once, trust is the currency of fundraising. So from your experience, when you work with ministers or you even raising funds yourself, what do you think is the one key to build that trust within the ministry itself and then between the ministry or the nonprofit and the donor?
Boy, that's a great question. And there are a lot of things that serve to do that. I think one is as you move along in authentic friendship and relationship, and people say, how do you treat a donor? I say, you treat them like a friend. Oftentimes they'll be some of your closest friends. And so, you move along together. It's a genuine relationship. And so if Orlando, you and I are buddies, I'm not always asking you for things, always talking about me. I'm interested in you as a person, not what you can do for me, not what you can give me. And so if you really will think about it as a model of like a healthy marriage, a healthy friendship, any healthy relationship, it's giving, it's serving. And I think this, and even oftentimes we'll quietly vocalize it and verbalize it out loud before a meeting. How can I bless this person before I go into any meeting? In a secular setting, it's how can I add value for them? But I often say bless, how do we bless them?
Yeah.
Because I think that what we do is a gift. Not only because I really believe this, and it sounds self-serving, but I really believe it, you bless generous people when you show them how they can be generous. I would say you further bless them when you show them where they can be generous and impactful in line with their values, right? But I think there are other ways, there are many ways we bless them, right? It may have nothing to do with our organization, but we're putting the relationship first. We're putting their interest ahead of our own. That's biblical, right? Care not only about our own needs, but put the others ahead of our own. And I think that, one thing that I often tell people, I recruit a lot of people into fundraising because again, we're all doing other things, before we, arrive here, whatever landed on the train. But I tell people all the time, I say, this is a very pastoral role, so there in my work, I deal with many believers who are donors. I deal with many non-believers who are donors. And whether it's in the donor, development context or any other walk of life, what are we called to do? Encourage people who have faith in Jesus, encourage them in that faith, closer to him, and encourage others who don't yet have faith in him, encourage them toward a relationship with him. And so if we're thinking about that first, and if we're not only living that out ourselves, but also hiring people who genuinely share those convictions, it's really hard to fail in fundraising. There are things that we need to do in addition, certainly. We need to have an inspiring vision. We need to boldly communicate that there are things we can do, and they're not rocket science, but it starts with, to your point, Orlando, a trustworthy relationship. And then when, as it relates to our organization, we try to foster a culture and develop. I've heard you talk before about development culture. I know it's a big deal to you. I'm obsessed with culture. You walk into an organization, you take a deep breath, smell the culture. And I hope the executive directors and everyone on your podcast here listening, are mindful of this. What are those values that we're either by default or design that we're injecting into our culture? You walk into an organization, is it a spirit of kindness? Is it a spirit of hospitality? Is it a spirit of inviting? Those are the things that I'm constantly doing with donors. Hey, come see. When you're in DC or when you're aware, come see firsthand the impact you're having. If you give us a heads up, we'll make it the time of your life. If you're in town and you have an extra hour or 2 hours, drop by, announced or unannounced, and I'm confident you're going to be proud of what you're helping build.
Yes, because that's going to be one of the questions I wanted to ask you. Sometimes through building that trust or the relationship has deepened to a point that allows you to go with those bold asks and this huge and grand vision casting that so many of our smaller nonprofits have, because in a sense, they're called to change the world, for sure the world around them, by being faithful to the mission that they've been given. So how would you balance that trust building with the big asks when you're casting that vision to potential or even current major donors?
I just looked at my clock, my phone, not because I'm checking text, but because I looked at the time. It's 3:30 p.m. where I am. 23 hours ago, I was on a phone call with a donor in California. This is a donor who, bluntly, he's far from the Lord. I don't believe knows the Lord. We've had faith conversations. I've invested in that relationship. My principals that I've worked with invest heavily in that relationship. He's always been generous to our organization financially, but he hasn't gone up in 7 or 8 years in terms of his giving. That's okay. We feel called to love him, to minister to him. And he said to me many times over the years, he said, I want a family like yours. I want a wife like yours. I said, you know where I met my wife? I said, I met her in church. And I said, I know you live in an area that's kind of, he lives in LA. He's in a nice suburb of LA. And there aren't as many good churches there as there are where I live. But I found 2 that are excellent Bible teaching, Bible believing churches. I said to this friend, and he's a friend now for 15 years. I said, I'm going to come out and I'll do it back-to-back weekends, however you want. And we're going to go check out these churches. And we're going to get you plugged in there because I know he needs the Lord more than he needs anything else. But secondly, where are you going to, you're not going to find, someone on, Match.com in LA, so, it's just a sensitive thing, right? It's delicate. And so I'm saying, how do we do this? How do we serve him and help him? Well, fast forward, that's been going on for a couple of years. Fast forward to 23 hours ago, I called him and I haven't asked him for anything financially in terms of support in probably a couple of years, just given the nature of some of the things he's doing and other things. And I said, hey, we're trying to start something. I'll tell you this, he's given $250,000 a year, has for 7 or 8 years. And I said, hey, we're trying to start something. We talked just casually for 5 minutes. And I said, we have someone who's putting up $1 million. We need someone else to put up $1 million. Would you be open to a conversation? He goes, love it. He said, yeah, I'll do it. I'll do it. And so, I wouldn't, there's a lot of things we could unpack there, Orlando, but, one is that he trusted me. He trusted me when I told him, and there's a ton of transparency. He could come see it any day of the week. It's an AI project where, we feel like some people who are working very adamantly against us are using this very effectively, have all kinds of tools and capabilities, and that, our kind of orbit is lagging behind. We need someone that can coach and train and incorporate some of these things. This guy is a venture capitalist. He's invested in AI for years. I said, not only do I know you have a passion for this, but I think you have some insights that could be valuable. If we could give you a call every once in a while or let you come into town and visit with our team, I think you could really turbocharge everything we're trying to do. So there's that personal involvement. So there's a lot of transparency, I guess, is the point. But that's just one, or maybe my most recent example of strong relational trust turning into strong organizational trust that translates into big dollars.
Yes. So you did 3 things that were super key. One, this is what I always tell people, and I know it's going to sound bad. I know it is, but just bear with me. When I just go, we want to use our donors' words. I used to say against them.
Yeah.
And now I say for them.
Yeah.
They have told us through the time that we spent in building relationships from day one, what they want, both out of their philanthropic giving, but also out of life. So you did that because through that, they're showing you their cards in a sense. And they're saying to you, this is what I believe in, and these are my values. When they say that in a very nice way, what they're doing is they're asking in a subconscious way to go, what are you going to do to help me expand my values? And when we align our mission with their values, all we have to do is ask, which is the 3rd thing that you did, right? Because you could have done all of this, but if once you don't build a relationship and you don't align their values with your mission, even if you did those 2 things right, they're not just going to give simply for the sake of giving. They want to be invited by you into something deeper. And I always tell them, the invitation isn't for financial support. The invitation is for your donor to go into a deeper relationship with your organization, into a deeper commitment with your mission, for them to really say to you, I am bought in. I'm not being bothered. What happens is a lot of the time, small or faith-based organizations feel like we're bothering donors when we're contacting them. This is why they just go, we do a lot for fundraising in the last quarter of the year because that's when donors expect us to call them. And I just go, why? Right? So what shifts have you made or have you helped others make when you have sort of helped organizations step into this development strategy with more confidence? Because part of it is really having that confidence to go, my mission is important, so much so that it's important people, so it's worth people supporting it, right? So how do you show them that lens when you're working with organizations?
Yeah, well, I don't think that we can overemphasize what you just said in terms of aligning their values with our mission. If we take the time to understand their heart, what they care about, their objectives, their mission, their goals, and then we thoughtfully calibrate those things with our mission, we've created an environment where we can be successful. I don't want to present that as formulaic because I deal with people, we're not dealing with formulas. I want to be careful there, but I think that if we lead and emphasize and obsess over the relationship, the money will often follow. But if we lose the money, the relationship will never develop, right? And to your point, it's not just the giving, it's the fondness, it's the affinity that they're developing for their gift is that is itself cultivation and stewardship and kind of prepping for their next gift, right? And so the gift itself is an act of cultivation. So, oftentimes we, and I'm sure this is true for many people listening, we find ourselves, running this organization, running this mission, leading this team, and maybe we are the team, and I don't say that, mockingly at all. I mean, I'd say that with tremendous admiration for every person out here that's wearing multiple hats and trying to run an organization and have the impact and raise the money at the same time. Whether you have other people helping with that or not, or whether it's just you, I admire it and I take my hat off to you. But, again, going back to your point earlier, you weren't in first grade saying, hey, I'm going to be a fundraiser. We also, many of us had parents that probably taught us, you don't ask people for things, you don't ask for money, and then, not to get ahead of ourselves, but for goodness sake, you never ask someone what they're doing with their things when they're dead. I mean, that's a whole other podcast. By the way, I will see that is the number there's not a close second in terms of development topics I'm passionate about. Plan giving, I think, is just the biggest opportunity, but that's not what we're talking about now. And what we're talking about is how do you turn the corner from someone who and fills their see, I don't think that people oftentimes feel they're bothering donors as much as I feel like people try to erect excuses or barriers so they don't have to interact with donors. They'll hide behind a laptop and research them for 2 weeks. They'll send letters and solicit every gift from every person they can ever get an email or an address for. And they'll do all these activities rather than the highest impact, highest return activity, which I would also argue is the most gratifying and enriching activity, which is going out and spending time and developing authentic, growing, lasting relationships with donors. And so my word for if you're that fundraiser, if you're that executive director who's sitting there saying, gosh, I don't want to bother them, I would just, first of all, remind yourself, they've already self-identified. They care about your mission, and by extension, or maybe in reverse order, they care about you personally. This is not adversarial. This is not us against them. This is not them tight fist holding money and we're trying to rip it away. Listen, picture us going from opposite sides of the table. I'm sitting side by side next to them, shoulder to shoulder, arm in arm. They're a friend and they care about what we're doing. And so we really believe we are enriching and blessing their lives. Put differently, I would say we are not doing our job. I'd say we are failing them in terms of stewardship if we are not communicating regularly. They're left wondering, well, is this a good organization? Are they having an impact? Do they appreciate it? Do they even know I sent a gift? And so I would say there's a lot we can gain by leaning in relationally, not in the last quarter, and I'll talk about that too in a second, leaning in relationally year round. That's how, relationships don't happen in certain seasons. Relationships happen in real time. Can I speak to the last quarter?
Absolutely. Go for it.
I hold our profession and certainly the fancy, sophisticated people in our industry in very low regard. Right? Can I say that and be so crass?
Yes, 100%.
I think that people are always trying to automate relationship or automate fundraising to the point that it eliminates relationships. I think people come up with excuses and do the right things with care. And one example of it, I'll call it Giving Tuesday, hypothetically say, great. And I'm not saying that someone's going to say, well, we raise money on Giving Tuesday or we raise money at this. And I always say, maybe so. at what cost? Right? Maybe so, but is the highest and best return on your efforts, on the relational equity, the highest and the best return you get with similar efforts and output elsewhere, right? If you put all that manpower into the relationships rather than this gala, how much more powerful would those, 100 people, how much more could they do individually than this one size fits all, in my opinion, dishonoring ask of everyone in the room? Pray for 1 minute with your spouse and then transformational gift, because it's the best time for us. It must be the best time for all of us right now, right? And so we do these things in our industry that, to me, again, the overarching word I use in donor relations is honor. We honor donors, maybe with an award, maybe with naming something, but more broadly and more commonly, we honor them as people first. And that means that we operate not just in our own timing, not just our own flow, not most convenient for us, but what you've cracked the code on, Orlando. It's a donor centric approach. We put ourselves in their shoes and what's best for them. And so, Giving Tuesday, here our hands are open. It's sophomoric, it's childish. In my, again, it's a sore subject clearly for me. I think you need to get some therapy.
Yes, I smile because finally my audience and some of our clients that actually listen to our podcast are not just listening to me say what you said. I almost flipped my computer table when you said about the galas, because I just tell them all the time. I was like, listen, if this is your main fundraising event, you're doing it all wrong.
Yeah.
Culturally, some organizations need to do their galas. And I'm not saying they don't have their place, but I always tell them, this is the beginning. This is your entry into a formal relationship with somebody. This is where everyone gets their, because I just,
well,
you're doing it wrong.
The gala and events in general, in my mind, are great for cultivation. They're not necessarily first of all, they're never the fundraising strategy. They may be a fundraising tool, but they play into the strategy. What is the strategy? It's this continuum of relationship, right? And so it plays in differently. This event does for different people. Maybe not at all for some, maybe significantly, maybe profoundly for others, but it's case by case. Everything in donor relations is case by case. I'll tell you one interesting stat I noticed years ago was that I was working with an organization that has a very robust, a very mature plan giving program, people that had made gifts through their estate. And one thing that we noticed was that many, in fact, almost all of the people at an estate gift had attended one or more events. So I'm not discounting events entirely, but what I am saying is let's use them in their proper place.
Yes.
And you have some new relationships, hopefully, that you've formed from these events that you've done to this point. Now lean in relationally. The next don't have to be at the event next year.
Yes.
That's the on-ramp to the relationships, right?
That's exactly right. So what I tell you, you mentioned one more thing that I want to touch upon. You said, we're in the business, we want to honor our donors. And I've said that, so, scripture tells us that our goal is to outdo one another in honor, right? So I just go, we're in the business of honoring our donors. So this is actually a good segue into the next part, because so many of us meet with our donors one-on-one in that one meeting and either leave without asking or don't make a specific ask of our donor for whatever the reason. Maybe they don't feel like they built enough relationship. Maybe they were scared, right? And I just go, I always tell them, if a donor takes a meeting with you where you've prepped them and you've let them know that you want their support, they're 95 to 99% there. Or their waiting is for you to say, would you consider support? Or I always tell them, because we work with ministries a lot, would you prayerfully consider supporting us at this level or this level? I always like giving ranges so that they can see themselves in one of the two at least. So when you approach donor conversations, do you have like a mental checklist, like from prep to pitch to follow up?
Yeah. I am probably the most deliberately underprepared person going into any meeting that you'll ever know. And underprepared may be the wrong word, because I think things, and mentally, I'm not thinking about things.
Yeah.
Like I'm not going in with a pitch. I'm not going in with things that feel regimented or forced or anything like this, right? So, again, I'd say this, not even tongue in cheek, like the only hard and fast rule that I have in development is everything's case by case, right? That's not just the relationships, that's every interaction, right? I don't want to be so locked in on something. And okay, I'm really going to get myself banned from your podcast now, Orlando. I'm going to go after the Holy Grail of Development Inc., as I refer to it affectionately. Okay, the Holy Grail, moves management. So for those that are new to development, moves management is this concept that you map out the next, I don't know, is it 5 or 6 or 8 moves with a donor, and I'm going to call them and say this, then I'm going to send them something, and then I'm going to meet, I'm going to do, and at some point, or 8 or whatever move is unique. And it's like predetermining all these actions, right?
Relationships, all of the relationships.
And I would argue that's taking all the relationship purely out of it, right? Because you're a robot, it's impersonal. The worst example I ever heard of this, I had a donor once, lived up on the coast in Maine, and he said this, from his alma mater, this young fundraiser came in, and they had a great visit, and he says, hey, this is awesome. I love what y'all are doing. Aren't you going to ask me for anything? He says, no, I'm not supposed to ask until the 3rd visit. And so that's one of the obvious most extreme examples you'll ever hear. But it kind of reveals like mindset on this stuff, is that I don't want to be so scripted that, okay, I'm supposed to accomplish this. Listen, I always have an ask in my back pocket, figuratively speaking. I always know what I would like to ask, but I also am very keenly aware that I may or may not take that out. I may or may not ever go there. There could, again, I've said this is a very pastoral role. There may be all kinds of things going on their life. I'm there to minister, right? And at my starting point, then we'll see where we go on the other. I would rather err on the side of serving them and their needs where they are in that particular moment than even sometimes getting an ask out. But to the point that you're getting at, which I completely agree with, Orlando, is that people don't mind being asked. People are not offended to be asked. In fact, within reason, I would argue that you can hardly over ask in terms of an amount. They're not angry if you ask for more than they can give. Between us, they're kind of flattered, right? And not to suggest egos, really, but people, oh, wow, you thought I could do that. That's really nice. The other thing about asking is it creates all kinds of opportunity. It opens up this whole potential, if I ask for too much, guess what I can do? Listen, what? Because I don't want the ask to seem arbitrary, right? Would you consider this? Well, you've been given 50 now. No, it's not a certain progression we expect you to be on. But it's always start with a big vision, inspire with a big vision. How does our city look different in 20 or 30 years because we're doing what we're setting out to do? That big vision is backed up by a credible plan. It costs something, and we back into that something, right? Ideally, that plan is over a few years, and we're going to have a reason to ask them not only to do more, but to do it over a few years. And as an executive director of a growing organization, every person listening, it should be your absolute best friend could be a multi-year pledge. But you have ability and certainty and all these things. And so, but here's the other thing about the ask. To your point, I make an ask. Oh, I can't do that much. Well, could you do it over a couple of years? Could you do it over a few years? What? Now my $25,000 donor who I just asked for 100, they can't do it, but they could do 50 a year for 2. That's a win. We'll take it. We'll keep going. Or what's I used to use a casual term, or use words against them, which we use the words for them, like you said, but my least acceptable outcome. My least acceptable outcome is not at all what's acceptable, but it is what I'm thinking. I think this is like a baseline of what I can anticipate in terms of results. Yes. I think it's going to be at least this. Well, then what does that same $25,000 do? Oh, well, I can't do more than I'm doing now. Well, listen, what you're doing now is significant. And as we're trying to grow, we need our friends, we need people to be strong. So we need to be strong in every way. Would you be willing to the next 4 years? Go. You guess what? Now you have that certainty, that predictability. And that's a real gift, not only to you for planning purposes, but it's even a gift from psychologically fundraising, because guess what?
Yes.
Now I'm starting the new year, not at 0. I'm starting the year with wind in my sails.
That's so good. Because I always tell them, that's sort of the difficult thing about our field. Like every year, every either 7-1 or 1-1, we start at $0 in the bank. Like we just got to do it all over again. Right. But you mentioned something that was really good. One of our goals is to grow the mission that we've been entrusted with, right? To continue to gather support and to continue to impact the lives of the many people that we serve. You mentioned something, right? When you approach a donor and we just go, here's what our neighborhood, our city, our state, the nation will look like, as we continue to provide our resources and the mission that we want to accomplish in the next couple of years. When I work with a client, I always go, ask yourself, who would do it if it's not you? Like, who's going to do that if it's not you, right? So our goal always is to grow and to allow both the Lord to work in this mission, but also to allow the Lord to work in the lives of our donors through their philanthropic support. But as organizations grow, as ministries grow, there's always that risk of becoming too corporate or becoming too generic, or almost like losing their own flavor, their authenticity, right? Or their true mission. How do you stay, or what do you say to those who find themselves in a growth pattern right now? How do you keep them authentic and rooted in what their DNA is as they continue to grow and scale up?
The one word I always think about is competitive advantage, right? What is our unique opportunity? How are we gifted? How are we positioned in a way? We can't be everything. My organization, we can't do everything. We have organizations approach us often, or people that want to start something within our organization. We say, you know what? Yeah, we could start, but we're not trying to get big for big sake.
For the sake of, yes.
Bureaucratic and inefficient, all these things. We actually do better. You would know on this call that have approached us about starting different organizations under the umbrella of ours. And we've said, we think you could do better. We think you could actually exceed us in terms of possibly impact, in terms of fundraising, all these kinds of things. And that's great. We want to bless that. And so we've incubated like 17 different groups, not as a part of ours, but as to help them spin out and do something significant. So part of it is recognizing what is your unique value add? What is the gap that you are feeling, the way you said it, I like it, that no one else did, right? Or that no one else has done, or that you could do better than anyone else is doing it, right?
Yes.
And so if you can answer that question, then it may be something you should be looking at. If that's outside of that scope, then maybe not. But I would say always, I think that I'm really passionate about vision. I think that vision is our true north. I would say all talk to donors, always lead with vision, because that inspires a lot of fundraisers. And this may be a tendency for some new fundraisers on the podcast here to lead with need. We need this, or we're this much short, or it's about the budget or whatever.
Yeah.
I pleaded with you. And I'm sure Orlando has told, please don't ever make that mistake. Please always lead with vision, because the vision inspires. Incrementalism, poverty mindset, need, those things do not inspire. You have to carry that burden. It's real and it doesn't exist, but that's not how we're going to lead our donors to do more or to get more involved. So always lead with vision with our donors, but I would say also always lead with vision and speak vision language internally to yourself and to your team, because vision only lives through our words. And so if we're not speaking it, it quite literally doesn't exist. And so if we're not talking about our vision, if we're not thinking about it, if we're not inviting others into that, then we will not be locked in on what is our true north.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. This has been so good, Doug. I know we're going to come to a close because we're hitting our time, but let me ask you this. A lot of our listeners are either new to fundraising, they are leading a small staff, maybe 2 or 3 people max, or, which is some of our clients as well, in a sense, they're the organization.
Yeah.
What encouragement would you offer to someone in their position?
Yeah.
Leading, being the only one, or with a tiny team? And what would you offer to them?
Man, first of all, I just want to, because you're doing something that matters, and it may feel lonely, it may feel hard at times, but keep at it. There's going to be breakthrough. The second thing is that you genuinely have what you need to be successful. There's a lot of people who do what I do, who do what Orlando does, and they're going to tell you this whole checklist of things that you have to be good in development, fancy CR and a researcher and a grant writer and the list goes on and on forever. They're all things, none of which you can afford. But I'm going to tell you, they're none of the things that you necessarily need. A vision and a voice. And I mean, just a voice to go talk to one person at a coffee shop, whoever that, cast the vision, inspire people with that vision, invite them to be a part. Guess what? Have a fundraising program. You have a development strategy.
Yes.
That's rudimentary, that's simplistic, maybe oversimplistic, but not much. I promise you. Listen, you can keep lists on a spread. You can Google someone and you can get what you need. But listen, good things only happen when nothing good happens. I would say, all the other noise, block it out, tune it out, obsess over the relationship, lean in, go see them often. Relationships, friendships, it's not just about the business. So for lunch, and yes, we're going to talk shop, and yes, we're going to give them updates and invite them and ask and do these things. But I would encourage you, with our friendship, create opportunities for fun, create opportunities for experiences, because that's what friendships really are about. And turbocharge these relationships in a way that, I can't tell ball games, concerts, vacations, that we do because these people are friends first. And so if you lean into the fun, again, your life is going to be enriched. You're blessing your donors. And I can just all but guarantee you the money will follow.
Amen, Doug. Thank you. This has been so rich, such a wonderful conversation. I want to be honest with you and our listeners. I had to stop myself so many times with the things that you said from going in those directions because we could have been here for like 3 or 4 hours. So thank you. Thank you for sharing your time, for sharing your wisdom. I feel like we're all walking away with something that we can do this week to implement in our work as fundraisers and in this development work. So thank you.
Thanks for having me.
To our listeners, if this episode has sparked something for you, my only encouragement this week is for you to share it. Share it with a colleague, share it with someone you care about, share it with someone who you believe would benefit from listening to this episode. And I want to encourage you to continue to build those relationships with your donors, grounded in that trust, in that authenticity, integrity, and purpose for your mission. This has been the Donor Centric Approach. Remember to keep your donors at the center of everything that you do, and you will see results. Thank you so much. Take care, and God bless.
1,